Everyone, Justine here with a new paper crafting tutorial. Today we're going to be making a Venetian Mask card using Suzy stamps. Now I had the inspiration from this card after watching The Black Swan, and I decided the whole dark side, light side was a really cool concept to play with, and I had gotten the stamp in the mail from Suzy and couldn't wait to get started. So you're going to need the two stamps. You're going to need white embossing powder. You're going to need an embossing bag of some sort, Versamark, black ink, and a piece of black cardstock. So they're pretty standard supplies to create this card. All the supply lists and links are listed in the description as well on my blog, and you can be directly linked to Suzy Stamps store and if you're interested in purchasing these stamps at all. Okay, so we're going to lay these flat on our card so we know where we want to put them. And you just want to make sure that they're nice and straight. You can use a grid to help you if you'd like. I'm going to take these stamps and I'm going to pick them up with my Fisker stamp press. And then I'm going to ink them up and stamp them both at the same time using MEMENTO black ink. Once you have your stamp completely inked up, we're just going to stamp this on our white card base. This is the top folding card that I created, and it's 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. We're going to apply some even pressure to make sure that this stamp stamps perfectly onto the card base. Okay, so we have a nice clean impression here. If you're using that stamp for the first time, you might want to stamp it on a scrap piece of paper first and then stamp. So that's called seasoning your stamps. I'm just going to clean off my stamp set using my spray and my scrubber. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to ink this up with Versamark ink. And Versamark is almost like an ink glue where our powder is going to stick to. If you haven't used this before, I've used this in lots of videos, and this is called heat embossing. Just going to tuck down that foam little foot there because my stamp's a little on the larger side. I'm using this EK Success tool. It's a powder so that the embossing powder doesn't stick to any sort of static or anywhere where it's not supposed to be sticking. Alright, now it's time to line up our black cardstock panel with our card. Now, I had to play around with this at first. The first time I created this, I didn't line it up at all, and it was disastrous. So you're going to place the black cardstock kind of where you would be putting it on normally on the card. And I think what I would do actually is leave that black panel on there if you're unsure with your stamping, and then just stamp directly. And if you get a little bit on the white cardstock, it's not a big deal. It's see-through anyway and dries see-through, so it wouldn't be a big issue. I took it off to the side here and stamped down. And this is just a recreation of the card I already did, and it didn't fit as nicely on the card panel as when I originally did it. So that's my advice to you, is to keep it on the card base and then stamp, and then don't worry about the Versamark that kind of gets on your card base. I'm just going to grab a scrap piece of paper here so I can catch the embossing powder. I've been meaning to switch to Tupperware containers, as I've seen on several YouTube channels, and that seems so useful, but I just haven't had the time to do that just yet. I'm just going to sprinkle the white embossing powder. It's a super fine embossing powder by Ranger. Because of the details on this card panel and this stamp, I would recommend using a fine embossing powder. Using my tweezers, I just grabbed it and flipped the back and got any excess powder off of it. I'm just going to take a dry paintbrush and remove any of the excess powder that's stuck to the paper. I just had a little bit there in the eye. Now we're just going to use our heat tool to melt the embossing powder and make a nice, awesome impression. Now it's a good idea to heat up your gun before putting it directly to paper so that your card doesn't warp, your cardstock. And when it's all melted and a pure white, then you're finished. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to add some 3D foam tape and attach this to the front of our card. It doesn't really matter. You could have stamped the other half of the mask on it and had the dark side first. It's really up to you. I grabbed 5 of these pop dots and just added them to the back of the panel, and so that I could get it to pop up and really just add an extra effect. You can also just leave it flat on the card. That would work as well. Now you're going to need to line up this card panel onto the front of the card, and you're going to need to line up the saying as well. Now for me, as I had said before, this is actually a recreation of a card I actually already created. I usually don't do that, but I accidentally deleted the video I had for that card. And anyway, so I just recreated it. So I didn't have so much of a white panel on the side. But anyway, here was the card that I had made previously that I really like. And that was my entry for So Suzy stamps. I also just stamped that stamp and left it as is and added some rhinestones. I used gold embossing powder in this one. And then I used silver embossing powder on this one. So pick a favorite and let's get creating.